My name is Georgia Holston. I'm founder of RegTech Talks, and welcome to the third in our series, Feeding the Future. This event, Insect Protein Sustainable Food Production, is going to be on how food producers are going to have to adapt to meet the ever-growing food demand. The UN quotes that agriculture organisation global food production is going to need to increase 70% by 2050 to meet the demand of the predicted 9 billion population on the earth by that time. So this series is looking at ways that we can look at different innovation to help sustainably feed the future. So this event specifically, we've really been looking forward to. It's something that's quite niche. It's something that we haven't really talked about before, but it's something that's completely blowing up. And I know that some of the panelists that we have here today are really here to create just some awareness and get people on side when it comes to insect nutrition. As our population grows, so does the demand for food and therefore the need for livestock. In 2016 alone, livestock was fed more than 1 billion metric tons of feed, and this requires a considerable amount of land and water. We think that insects might be the answer to more efficient and sustainable food supplies. So we're going to speak to some industry leaders, innovators, and experts in the field today to talk about how we can move into a more sustainable future and how insect nutrition might be the key to that. So first of all, we're going to hear from Thomas. He's the CEO and founder of Better Bugs, which we love the name of to start off with. And he's going to talk to us about well, I'm going to give him the introduction and you can tell us what you're going to talk about, Thomas, because you'll give it a much better intro than I will for you. So I'm going to pass straight over to you without any further ado. If anyone has any questions, please put them in the Q&A function and we'll ask the panelists in the Q&A session after the presentations are done. Otherwise, I'll pass that over to you, Thomas, to start off the show.
Okay, thank you, Georgia. I'll just bring up the slides now. And bear with me a second. Okay, I think we are good to go. And so, keeping to time. Okay, so in a nutshell, I will be telling you a bit about what we do at Beta Bugs, but I'm kind of going to go for a bit of a broader perspective on the sector as well, and how things operate in it as well. So really, Beta Bugs is an insect genetics company, and we make better insects for the insect farming sector. So we develop and distribute breeds of black soldier fly for what would be the insect protein sector. So when we say this, it's basically black soldier fly can be fed on substrates such as food waste and agricultural waste, converted into a protein source, and the larvae converted into a protein source and then used as an ingredient in fish, pig, chicken feed and live larvae as well. And there's a bit on that in terms of the regulatory I'll touch base on as we go forwards. As a genetics company, really, so this is just a bit of a blurb around the company, but as a genetics company, we're all about developing breeds which grow faster, improved efficiencies, are tailored more to industry requirements in terms of the ingredient profiles, and building something which creates scalable, profitable impact for our sector. It's a first focus on feed, but we do see it branching out further because black soldier fly has applications in a number of industries. So I've mentioned this, we develop and distribute breeds of black soldier fly, and the way we do that is through quantitative genetics primarily. And the reason we're doing that is because insect protein has to be competitive on price point to gain a further market traction. And that's achieved through increasing the scale of production, but also through improving genetics. We're leaving scale to the producers of black soldier fly, whilst we focus on the genetics. And then the genetics get deployed alongside producers. We do this through quantitative genetics, high throughput trait measurements, so measuring individuals and populations, and then custom zoo technologies which have been developed with a focus on breeding. And really, the reason I'll talk a bit about our sector first, and then we'll dig a bit more on the regulations. But really, what we're seeing in our sector is it's rapidly scaling, It's received to the tune of $500 million in funding already, if not more, from private and public sector. And it's anticipated to be worth $8 billion by 2030 when you look at market reports. Now, what we're seeing is that there's companies which have really staked the ground out in terms of vertical integration and doing the whole supply chain. So growing the larvae, working on R&D as well, different aspects of R&D, and then also producing larvae at scale, which they'll then process into the feed and the protein effectively, and then supply to feed manufacturers. And this is characterized both in the EU and North Americas. What we're seeing UK-wide, for example, is a bit more of specialized focus, where we're doing, for example, genetics, and Cycle is focusing on the farming and production of black soldier fly, and Better Origin is focusing on post-processing of black soldier fly. And this is a project which has been funded by Innovate UK, which is called the Insectorial Revolution, for anyone wanting to look it up. And this is a different approach. It's a segmented supply chain where things are specializing and getting good at one thing and then working together to bring insect protein to market. And increasingly, what we're also seeing is off-the-shelf equipment providers. Bob will be talking in a bit as well. And this is really exciting, actually. It's the bit where black soldier fly producers can, or people wanting to be black soldier fly producers, people or companies can engage with the sector and get kit off the shelf equipment to get an operation up and running. Because to date, it's actually been, we've got a bit of a closed industry sometimes in terms of communication, and everyone has to develop their own systems and processes. And that makes it a bit slow as an industry to develop further. So again, in terms of challenges, this is my perspective on what we've got as challenges, both in terms of some biology, but also some regulatory, which I'll dip into. It's with black soldier fly, it's interesting. You've got two animals in one. So you've got the larvae, which grow and eat the substrate, and that's what gets made into protein. But then the fly is what lays the eggs and closes the life cycle to get you more larvae. And that's interesting from the perspective of the industry. You actually have to operate two facilities nearly. You've got these cages for growing the flies, but then you have the larvae for producing the protein. And in some cases, we're actually seeing decoupling of that system, where can people just focus on growing the larvae and not worry about growing the flies, just receive eggs? And that's what we're looking at as well, as terms of supplying eggs to the market, so that customers can actually just diverge, and if they want to, and just focus on doing the really important bit, which is the production of protein. In terms of its bioware, not technology, this is, I think, just something for people to keep in mind when you're talking about innovation in agri-food and things like this. It's just the case that we can always categorize things in terms of digital and technologies, but this is biology and things which live and breathe and get improved and changed. So it's just how do we categorize these things when it comes to funding streams, when it comes to incentivizing and enabling people to take it up. It's a young industry, it's still developing to a degree, and we're seeing that dynamicism. I think that means when it comes to engaging with larger companies, there's just being able to meet the requirements of other industries, and the agri-food industry in particular requires large volumes. So it's all about getting our industry to scale. That means we're having to break new ground as well, to be honest, in terms of both as companies who have to develop new innovative technologies, but also as an industry to make sure we're breaking ground on standards. I think the other one, I'll skip the timing there, but it is about timing, making sure things happen at the right time, both in companies again, but as an industry. And I think to enable all of that, really, it's about finding the right people and attracting them to join what is a young, vibrant, and emergent sector, which will have a long future ahead of it. So this is the time to get involved and shape the industry. And I think, so this is what I was saying, finding the right people will be key to addressing all of these. In terms of regulatory challenges, admittedly, I've not changed the icons, but I have changed the text there. We've got this two animals, but also thinking about it, how do we classify and use insect products? I was just talking about eggs there in terms of where the eggs sit in terms of classification. This is new stuff coming through. So regulatory bodies might find that their frameworks have to adapt over time to enable this industry to operate at full capacity. There's also questions about biotechnology, new genetics technologies being applied to this industry, much in the same way being applied to things like the plant breeding sector, but also to the animal breeding sector in terms of development of new traits through technologies such as CRISPR-Cas, which allows for gene editing. And then moving to the next ones, we've got different markets which have different regulatory standards, which means you get different playing fields in terms of the production. And in some instances, for example, let's take Europe, you can only grow your black soldier fly on pre-consumer vegetable food waste. And that is very different in other parts of the world. And therefore, that's a bit like what we're seeing with the concern about the Australian UK trade deal. How do you make it work so that your homegrown industry can be competitive and maintain itself against others? And this is happening in our industry as well with different markets. I've alluded to new regulatory processes in terms of the products and making sure that we can bring this to market. Again, it's all about getting the right people involved to make that happen and to make sure that timing is relevant to this industry. If it's left too late, industries can suffocate. But at the same time, you also want to make sure you're engaging with the industries to develop the frameworks. And this is happening already at Europe level. We've got the International Platform for Insects, Food and Feed, which engages with the European Commission to make sure those frameworks are being built in the right way. And it is really about, what we've got here is a novel industry, which is different, and therefore applying frameworks, for example, around typical animal production doesn't really always work. So it's a case of stepping a bit back and adapting and thinking about what needs to change and how do we make that happen for this industry to truly scale. And I'll just say, I wouldn't be able to talk to you today if there's not a great team driving our progress behind this. And I've highlighted Izzy with a purple circle again, because she's the person on the ground from our side working on the regulatories and shipping and logistics. So if you've got any other questions, feel free to drop me a note here, and then we can always address. Brilliant. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Thomas. That's a great introduction. I think that what I really took away was the fact that you're saying, you know, it is a novel industry. And what we always find with any sort of anything that's coming, anything that's new, anything that's being, even if it's something that's a new technology or a new platform that's being introduced to a more established industry. So, for example, we are looking at agriculture and we're looking at ag tech, but you know, everything that you guys are doing, it is so new, and it's always a bit of a difficult thing because you've got to take, it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation when it comes to regulation. There has to be people like yourselves who are the pioneers who are going to take a step forward and say, let's just go and get something done, because actually the regulations aren't even, you know, up to date. They're not even, they can't even keep up with the innovations that you guys are doing, but someone has to do something. You can't just wait for these regulations to be put in place. And if you're working very, very closely with the people in charge, and you have your Izzy who's in charge of that, and you're already aware of, do you know what, we are going to have to be looking at these regulations. Why don't we help to put them in place instead of being afraid of them and thinking, oh, let's not do anything because it might not be to standard. Let's work and, you know, create that path together, so we all have that great standard. And that again moves into the whole thing around collaboration as well. And this is something that came up with within our vertical farming event, and it's that the fact that you know, a high sea raises all boats. And if everyone is collaborating together, and you know, it's one of those themes that comes up with technology. It's one of those themes that comes up with very novel, new, and young industries. That actually that ethos of collaboration, that you know, openness to work together, stop being siloed away. It means that we can all actually work together and push the industry forward together, and it'll be beneficial to everyone involved. So super interesting start to the event. Really appreciate that, Thomas. So next up, instead of me just putting my thoughts and questions in. If anyone does have any questions, I think that we have one in here already, which is really, really great. Roger, we'll come to you at the end in our Q&A session, but really appreciate you putting that one in already. We've got Bob Holtzman coming up next, so I'll hand over to you to do a bit of an intro to yourself and what you're going to be speaking about, Bob, and I'll go on to mute and hand that over.
Okay, thank you. Well, good day to everybody, whatever time zone you are. I will first briefly introduce myself because that's how it should be, let's say it like that. So I will share my screen. This share. Well, my name Bob Holtemans, born and raised in the Netherlands. I always say family, one wife, two children. It's always hard to make a joke on a digital conference, I think. But I'm an entrepreneur since 2004, and in the end, I started the company Insect Engineers. I will give you a bit more background on Insect Engineers. In the end, we have as goal, how to say, to create a sustainable future for our children. And in the end, we see the mission to do it to create a chain reaction of companies and people who contribute to that worldwide circular food production. And we think the commercial farming of black soldier fly is one of the most effective steps to go to this circular food production. The BSF larva is protein rich, and so a good food source for pigs, chicken, fish, and pets. Again, we focus initially on feed because we simply think there's the first biggest market. So it's not that you cannot go with insects to the food. Our focus is feed and in mass production. And mass production also means that we try to make BSF farming commercially attractive, because you can say that you want to change the world, but it helps when there's a financial aspect which supports, let's say, that goal. In the end, as Insect Engineers, we build and supply machinery and develop a climate system for the worldwide BSF industry, and that's what we're good at. We got acquainted with industry, I think at the end of 2016. We noticed there that the whole industry is farming on small trays, which is logic because it's an easy way to start and a low investment way to start. And of course, often when you start, you look around and see, okay, what's available, what's not available. And if your neighbor is doing a trays, you'll have the same starting point.
Bob, are you sharing your slides? I don't think that we can.
No, I'm not sharing my slide.
Okay,
that will come back. But it's still a secret for now. So when we got so people copy what the neighbor's doing, so also going on small trays, and they didn't consider how to do it on large scale. In the end, we were contacted by the company Synergy in Kenya to think along for other solution than tray farming. Because main issue with trays is when you want to go from a pilot phase to a larger scale, that investments are high, which also make your cost price higher. I spoke to a lot of growers who already spent 1, 2, 3 years or even more in BSF farming. And yes, they gained a lot of knowledge, but could not commercialize it because they didn't have the knowledge how to translate their operation into a commercial attractive operation. With the side remark that staying small seems impossible because it is known that the market potential is massive, but the potential customer for the BSF farmer is actually only interested in high volumes. So making an in-between step in size and growing gradually, it seems difficult. So it seems really, okay, pilot and then large scale. There's no real in-between step. In the end, our development has been focused on replacing the trays, and replacements we call zoom racks, and I will share my screen again. Just a moment. share. There we go. And so Zoom Rack is simply it's a vertical farming. Yeah, it's a trending word these days, and um, I'll give you the whole setup. Um, and we use this type of system instead of trays because with trays you have a lot of handling. You go from one room to the other, stacking, destacking. When you go large scale, you have a lot of transport movements, robotic arms, a lot of technology, sensors, which is all nice the first year in technology wise, but we know you have a lot of heat production in the room, humidity, ammonia. So that all has effect on your equipment. So we want to have something which is more idiot proof. And in this way, with the Zoom racks, it's we bring the machinery to the rack instead of the tray to the machinery. In the production room itself, there are no moving parts. Um, and yeah, so in the end, we keep it simple on that way. Um, I also put a question mark, what is large scale? Now there's no real definition yet what's large scale because for the one for processing 20 tons of waste is large, and for the other one 200 tons is small. The the most interesting question would be what's economically, but economically of course depends on your local situation, what waste streams you use, what's the cost price of those waste streams, what's the sales price, what's your market, things like that. um, I had to avoid what I missed saying is we divide the production of BSF in three groups, three steps: breeding, production, processing. Breeding is from 0 to 5 days, production from 5 to 14 days, and processing is, for example, drying, oil extraction, etc. The system again is focused on production, so on a 5 to 14 day old cycle, because again the market has gained knowledge a lot about breeding, about processing, because that was all possible on small scale. Um, I see a lot of customers who have experience with breeding, but don't know how to grow again on a larger scale. Um, in the end, if you again, you can these days we put a movie online, so you can that explains it much better than my pictures. But here you have understanding about you see on the left a picture with our zoom racks. It's a modular system, so on the picture you see, for example, 4 levels high. It can also be 7 levels high, can be 10 meter long, can also be 30 meter long. In the end, we use machinery to fill the substrate and the larva in the room. We also use machinery to empty the room. All rooms are climatized. This to make sure you have an optimal condition for the insects. And again, it's we focus on of the system is focused on to be able to deploy worldwide. So it doesn't matter where you are and what's your. You don't always say you don't need a professor to operate a farm. Of course, there's high-end software and climate control, but still to operate and to maintain, that's basic. Even with the machinery you see in the picture. Last year at San in Kenya, we delivered a production facility which can handle 200 tons of waste per day. But because of COVID, we could not travel. We were simply not allowed to travel to Kenya to help them start up the machinery. We all did it on distance. So with online talk and WhatsApp calls to make it work. It worked, and they started and they could run. But when we were there last year, October, okay, they, for example, didn't know it also had an automatic function. In all cases, we would always want to go to the customer to start up, but it also showcased that there's a certain, although it's technology, but a certain simplicity in using it and straightforwardness. Yeah, what can I say more? Again, I put my time already in 9 minutes, so I said I would stop at 10. So I will make end here again. On the website shows a movie. Oh yeah, one more thing. It was addressed also in the talk before. The industry itself is closed. It has problems in sharing knowledge. We starting now with the insect school. That too, it already explains to share knowledge. It will also be a sample farm, but at the same time, we also have contact with Wageningen and so on to do testing there and to all with the idea to share knowledge. And it will also be linked in the future, second half this year, to a website again to share knowledge. This is in some industries normal, not yet in this one. So yeah, so far my talk. Thank you for listening, and we will see your questions afterwards. Enjoy. If you're talking now, you're on mute.
Always happens. Thanks very much for that, Bob. I can't wait to hear more about insect school and how people can enroll in that. That sounds super interesting. I love your point around what is large scale, because I feel like because it's so nascent as an industry, the potential is actually completely endless, and it's really, really exciting place to be, isn't it? Also, really, what's really interesting to me is the fact that because the thinking around the whole industry is so new, it's sort of tech first. You know, you're talking about things like automation, and you're talking about things like optimal conditions and things like that. When, you know, traditional agriculture was first coming out, you know, no one would have thought about technology in the way that we do now. And again, it's the same as what we're talking about in our vertical farming. It is tech first, and people are trying to get things right quicker. You know, refining things as much as possible, because if we're talking about bringing down carbon footprints, if we're talking about bringing down emissions and that kind of stuff, why don't we start smart instead of, you know, refining things after you've gone in? So that's super interesting. And also the fact that, you know, what you're doing is that you're allowing for people to start, whoever it is. You talk about your clients in Kenya and keeping the capex quite low, so people can just start straight away and be like, you know, let's start this operation. It's really, really refreshing to see that you're allowing for people to do that, and also that it's a bit of a plug and play system. Again, meaning that you don't have to go to Kenya, you don't have to go and show people how to do it. You can do it over Zoom. Oh, it'd be lovely. And I know that it's more because you couldn't, but the fact that, you know, we don't have to fly around the world to show people how to use these things. It is super plug and play. It's really simple. Start your operation and off you go. Really, really interesting setup that you've got, Bob. And I'm really interested to see how things go in the future for you guys, because I know that you're going to take off, and hopefully the other people on the panel as well will be able to echo the similar sentiments around that. So again, if anyone has any more questions, please put them in the Q&A. Next up, we have Christian Corbus, the marketing director at Into Gourmet. He's going to be flying the flag hugely for the awareness around insect nutrition. So I'm going to pass that over to you, Christian, and you can give a bit of an introduction and go into your presentation. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Georgia. It's great to be here. We're going to shift gears a little bit, and I'm going to be reading a little bit of a manifesto about our industry and trying to tell a little bit about our challenges and trying to tell about the importance of how we're going to get to where we have to go. I have no PowerPoint. I'm not a big fan of PowerPoint, so I'd prefer just to talk to you as if we were just sitting in a cafe together having a discussion. So I'm an American entrepreneur. I started in logistics in the cowboy capitalism of Russia in the early 90s. Then I got into business development, founding some nonprofits, International Business Association, entrepreneur organizations. Then I started a small business bringing spicy gourmet chili sauces to Russia, which is not as easy as you would think. Now I'm involved in Into Gourmet. The idea is to revolutionize the food system in Europe with natural, healthy, and sustainable foods. So we are a small international team trying to change something. We raise what's called Aketa domesticus crickets. So we sell the basic ingredients to other producers of foods. So we sell cricket powder, whole dehydrated insects, and fresh frozen insects. Now we have a line of cricket pasta under the brand of Ego. which is out now. Please look around for it. It's a great, great pasta. I'm also a member of the board of the Belgian Insect Industry Federation, which is a great nonprofit trying to support the development of our industry. So I recommend you look at that as well. So what I want to talk about is today we have an opportunity to take one of the greatest steps forward in life expectancy, health, and quality of life since the understanding of microorganisms and sanitation and master complete reformation of eating habits, a complete reconstruction of our food system. We have to remember that in the 18th and 19th century, milk was one of the biggest killers of children. Even after the discovery of pasteurization, it took about 50 years for pasteurized milk to find its way to to shelves. Something similar is now happening with healthy food. But a lot of people are arguing this. A lot of people are resisting change. Resistance manifests itself through tradition and habit. In marketing, we understand that tradition and that's what we have to do. I have experience in this. When I came to Russia in the early 90s, entrepreneurship was looked at as criminal, as mafia. It was, you shouldn't be an entrepreneur. It was something bad after the years of communism. And then when I tried to introduce hot sauce to Russia, I'm introducing a completely new product onto a market where they think that mustard is too hot to eat. Or my grandmother taught me this, or we eat this, but not that. We can't eat this. It's icky, it's disgusting, it's terrible. And because business and government is too invested in the traditional foods and traditional food systems, and because it's just hard to change. I mean, it is hard to change. All of these feelings are very difficult. But as a market, we should emphasize that it is not only a negative existential threat. We should celebrate that if we can make these changes to our diet, to our food systems, we will live longer lives and better lives. Okay, a lot of effort has been put into science, which is great. These changes are necessary. A lot has gone into science. We can see it every day. It's great. I think the insect industry is leading the charge on introducing a completely new protein source, completely new source of, well, it's not new, but it's new to us in Europe, but a completely new source of food. So life expectancy was increasing nonstop for the last 100 years. But now suddenly, I don't know. You can argue this, but they say that it's starting to slow down. But we can argue that all day. We're not going to do that. But I think that everybody will agree that the great increases in life expectancy and quality of life have happened only through convincing people to change their routines. That means get vaccinated, wash your hands, use antibiotics, eat better, right? These are all like things that we hear all the time. But how can we do it? So we face another opportunity. If we can radically change our diets and how we make and distribute our foods, we can increase our lifespan and increase our quality of life. And I would argue that the main challenge is the main heavy lifting in making these changes is not necessarily in the science, or the science has already been done, but it's in changing people's minds. It's in marketing. And that is one of the greatest things because that's what business is good at. Marketing, right? We are great. We've been doing it for hundreds of years. We know how to sell things that people might not want at first. They think it's icky. They don't understand it. It's unfamiliar. And then all of a sudden they need it. And then all of a sudden every day they want to buy it. So my point is that science is not enough. I think we've already made most of the advances that we need to repair our food system. We've already made them. The biggest challenge right now is to convince people to adopt them into our lives. If it takes 50 years, as it did with pasteurization, it might be too late. So far, we've been trying to introduce insects to the consumer in like 3 or 4 ways, right? There's a Trojan horse method, which is usually grinding up insects into a flour or a powder and putting them into familiar products like crickets, crackers, or insect power bars, or bread. The second way is to try to sell exotic novelty items that people want to try once, like chocolate covered crickets or party bugs or something like this. Then we have people who are marketing to the niche markets like sports supplements, superfoods for extreme athletes, food for what this new group of people called the flexigans are called. Special dietary needs, people who have to avoid specific components, intolerances and allergies, and so forth. And special high protein needs for the elderly and infants, concerned citizens who are really passionate about ecology, sustainability, and natural foods. That's great, but I don't think it's enough to change our food system. It's a hodgepodge of different motivators, and it only creates small amounts of sales and product placements in specialty shops and on the internet. So we must create a food that is consumed daily and accepted as having insects. How do we do that? Usually in these presentations, somebody will come up with a 9-point plan and they'll say, we have to do this by 2022 and this by 2025. But I'm just going to say there's only one thing that has to be done. We have to untie the hands of small and medium-sized companies in our industry to allow them to market their products. I'm sure that the government and food safety authorities have the good of the public in mind. I'm sure that they're trying to do the best they can, but they're selling such mixed signals, which are destroying the insect industry even before it's able to begin. I think it might be in part because they don't understand how markets work. You know, bureaucrats are not business people. But on one hand, they try to support us with grants and reports and analysis and all kinds of stuff, but they have not allowed us to sell our products. it's, so by not coming to a rapid decision on the safety of our products and clear lines, they're destroying the companies, the few companies that were brave enough to start the industry. Very few companies are able to repeat these mistakes. A lot of people in the industry feel like the novel food system, which is the system to allow, that is the best way right now to allow insects to be sold as food in Europe, is a complete disaster. It's badly constructed. It's moored in indecision and bureaucratic waste of time. And the system actually has part of it that is able to create monopolies in the industry before it even begins by data protection. So the biggest disservice that the authorities have done has already been done. In marketing new products, we understand that timing is crucial. There's always a first phase where innovators and early adapters start to spread the word. In order for a product to become mainstream, the early majority has to become on board. If this opportunity is missed, you will be a product that everybody forgot about. No one remembers. Twice insect food had this window open and close again. In 2013, after the UN made its announcement, and again in 2018, there was a lot of energy about insects as food. Both times, authorities dithered and failed to take the necessary action. In 2015 and again now, there's a complete battlefield of dead startups and broken dreams, all because there's still no legal clarity in Europe about the right to sell our products. Without legal clarity, there's no possibility. There are no excuses. Every argument against immediate opening of the market to insect-based protein is just what I said before. It's the forces of habit and tradition. It is possible to safely make insects a part of our diet tomorrow. We've been eating them for thousands of years in other parts of the world. It's a matter of will, not more testing, not more debate. Government can do great things in very short times, in times of crisis and needs. And I'm telling you that right now is one of those times. All we need is clear, realistic rules Europe-wide for European producers to sell our products in Europe. I don't think I'm asking too much. I don't think my expectations are too high. If they are, I apologize. But I think that we must do it now. Thank you.
Well, you weren't wrong about it being a bit of a manifesto, Christian. But no, honestly, I think all of us here hopefully are 100% behind you on this, and it's all about perspective, you know, from one marketer to another. It's about placing a lens over a situation that is more palatable to the consumer. And I mean, you know, we've been talking about insect nutrition. Obviously, there's the dichotomy of the insects going straight into humans as opposed to being used for animal feed. But I think that, you know, in the UK, if you put a langoustine on someone's plate maybe 200 years ago, they would just be completely, you know, unaware of what it was, and that they definitely wouldn't eat it. But now, you know, I'll go downstairs and I've got a fridge full of seafood that would just be completely alien to my ancestors. And it is about that perspective shift. But it does need to be done a lot quicker because, as you say, and as Thomas has said, and has been a bit of a theme throughout this, the timing is absolutely crucial because this is happening now. And we need to change minds now. And as we say, we feel like there is a bit of a shift and people moving a little bit. I saw, I don't know if you saw on Twitter, Robert Downey Jr. tweeting about it. He did a piece on a late night show in the US where they were talking about insect nutrition, and it was like, okay, there's a bit of momentum here now. Let's, you know, all try and push this forward and act on the momentum that's coming out right now. That's one of the reasons why we put this whole show on this afternoon, because we feel like there's a bit of a momentum around this, and you know, hopefully with the attendees and with the panel, everyone would agree the same. So really appreciate that, and it's definitely something that all of us can get behind. And we're going to finish off with Leo. I'll pass over to you. You can give an introduction to yourself and your presentation, Leo.
Yes, thank you. Hi. Yeah, let me just share my screen. All right, yeah. I'm Leo. I'm a mechanical engineer, and I am co-founder of Nertus, a startup based in Germany, and we are developing automated insect farming solutions, and we want to install them on the farmer's side. So we want to integrate farmers who are already producing our food for hundreds and hundreds of years. We want to integrate them into this new industry of insect farming. So yeah, when we are talking about insect farming, we always also talk about the problem, which is the basis of this whole thing, I think. So when we have a look at Europe, we have quite a lot of animal farming going on here, but we do not grow that many high protein-rich feed here. So 75% of the protein-rich feed which is used for animal farming in Europe is actually imported. And where does this protein-rich feed comes from? Most of this comes from Brazil or other countries in South America. And yeah, we all know that one big problem about the soy production there is actually the deforestation. We just cut down the forest there, and this is no solution for the future. Also, another problem is actually the fish meal. Fish meal is really a good protein for animal farming. So we use a lot of fish meal in our diets for chicken, for pigs, and also for fish. But this fish meal, actually, where does it come from? Yeah, it is from the ocean. And every fourth fish which we catch in the ocean is actually dried, pulverized, and then fed to animal. So also this is not the right way to go. And keeping this in mind, I mean, the population is growing. Soon it will reach 9 billion people on the earth. Yeah, how do we feed all those people? So the FAO expect that already in 9 years, we'll have a shortage of 60 million tons of protein, which will be missing. So there we really need to change something. So yeah, one solution is actually insect farming, because insects, they contain like really high content in protein, a really good amino acid composition, good fatty acids, all those things which are really good to feed us as humans or also to feed our animals. Yeah, and the other good thing about insects actually is that they can really efficiently transform byproducts from the food industry into those high value protein. So what we do is we develop farming solutions like the machinery to enable farmers to enter this insect farming business. Because it's like, if we have a look at the farmers, I can just speak for the German farmers so far, but I think it's similar in other countries. So a lot of our farmers are really looking for opportunities because they also see that it's not going into the right direction. Especially in Germany, we have a lot of farms changing to organic farming, a lot of farms reducing their CO2 emissions also. And so we have this statistic that almost 60% of the farmers actually are looking for alternative sources of income. So they want to change the way they farm. But we have the problem that actually they have quite a lot of knowledge in animal farming. Yes, for sure. They do this for hundreds of years already, but insect farming is really new. So there's not so much knowledge available how to farm insects. They are only almost no courses about insect farming, like in the yeah. So they really need someone who helps them to start insect farming, but they want to start it. So we are talking to so many farmers, they want to start, but they don't know how. So what we do is we develop the automation, which we then sell to them so that they can start the insect farming. And besides that, we found out that, I mean, I forgot to say, we don't farm the black soldier fly, we farm the mealworm, which is like another insect, which is pretty good for farming. And when we had a closer look of it, like we have quite some experience in mealworm farming, and the most complicated thing in mealworm farming actually is the reproduction, as it is in most animal farming. So the reproduction, I mean the production, to get new mealworms basically. So we divide this whole system into two things. So we have on the one hand the fattening, where we put in like the eggs, and then the fully grown mealworm can be used as feed for chicken, for example. And we have the other part, which is the reproduction. And this more complex reproduction we do ourselves. So we not only provide the machinery, we also provide mealworm eggs, so that then the farmers, they can just do the more easy fattening of the mealworms. And because we are doing this in a centralized way, we can also do it much cheaper than if every farmer would have their own reproduction. Yeah, this is how one of our modules look like. So we have in the front, we have the automation, and in the back we have actually the climate chamber in which the mealworms live most of their time. Yeah, talking about the challenges we are facing at the moment. Actually, we as like pretty technical team, we are facing three mostly technical challenges also. There are much more challenges, and I think Bob already told a much wider view of the problems or challenges of the whole industry. But the ones we are facing actually is, one is the biology. Well, as I already said, in traditional animal farming, we know everything about how they convert their food, the feed into body mass. We know almost everything about the traditional animal farming. But as the insect industry is such a new industry, we know really little about how this whole thing is going on in insects. So we really need to understand how every little piece of how insects transform these byproducts into those proteins, how these things are working. So this is one challenge. The other challenge actually is the automation. This is like the most technical part, because you can imagine, like, insects, they are really tiny animals. So you cannot take care of every single tiny animal like you could with a cow, which is pretty big. So you can take care of one cow, but you cannot take care of the same weight in insects by hand, for example. It would be like 1 million insects or something. So we really need to have like a high grade in automation. And yeah, we have some companies already developing really good machines in there, but I think also there's a great margin which we can further improve. Actually, the third one, and this is, I think, one point which the whole industry is not looking that detailed into it, is how can we use the technologies which are available on the market, like artificial intelligence, big data analysis, and all those things, how we can use this to further improve how we farm insects. And this is the third challenge we are facing, to connect basically this farming topic to this really complex and really high technological artificial intelligence and data analysis topic. Yeah, actually, that's from my side. If you have any questions, contact me. I'm happy to help.
Thanks, Leo. I really appreciate that. I wonder, you're talking about things like you're one of the challenges is learning about the biology. You're learning more and more about the reproduction and that kind of stuff all the time. I mean, are other people doing research in the same things? And is there like a forum for discussion and idea sharing? Like, does it feel open source, or is everyone just sort of siloed away getting on with their own stuff? And do you feel like there's a way that we can make it a bit more of a community and we can share this and push the industry forward?
Actually, I mean, it was like a pretty closed industry for many years, but I think it's opening, so it's going into the right direction. With this one, we have quite some forums in which we can speak about the knowledge we generate, or in which we can share our thoughts and our ideas. So I think it's going into the right direction, that all the companies are starting talking to each other, because actually when we talk to each other, it's always so helpful. And I think we can just accelerate developing this industry with talking to each other and helping each other also. Yeah.
I mean, is the concern of people quite guarded that, if we find out a little bit more about how to optimize reproduction cycles, and we just give that away, to competitors, maybe it will deter from the value in our company? Is that kind of the concern?
Yeah, for sure. Yes. I mean, without your core knowledge, or you need to be better in at least one thing than the others. So if you just do everything open source, I think it's really tough. But I think we do not need to keep everything secret. So, but I can see that this is changing in the whole industry at the moment.
Yeah. Okay. Thomas,
you go first, Bob. You go first, Bob.
You sure?
Yeah.
Now, what I quickly want to add is when you talk about confidentiality and people, let's say, keeping secrets for each other. In the end, it's a bit strange, because everybody then knows, okay, the potential of the market is huge. The problem of the market is getting, let's say, a larger scale farm. So, in my view, people will never be competition. They can even better work together, and then together start a big farm, because they can both supply even the same customer, because they need large volume. So I think, for example, the coming 10 years, maybe in 10 years, you will become competition of each other. But for example, the first 10 years is more, you need each other actually to prove to the world that this industry is a good and viable industry, and that the world needs this industry. So, but that's of course very hard to. That's easy to say, but it's how to get it in the mindset of people. Okay, that's my view.
I agree.
Yeah, if I can chip into that, it's a bit like other industries for agricultural production in terms of if you want to build, enter an operation, you don't build your own tractor nowadays. You buy the tractor in and then you set up your operation. And increasingly, we will see this happen with insect farming where it professionalizes an industry and companies will be able to enter the sector and set things up. And then what you will compete on is not about who's got the secret sauce per se. It's about the efficiencies. Yes, you might access different pieces of equipment to do that, but it will be down to performance on farm and efficiencies to get the best prices of production.
Yeah, so we did have one question, I think that it was for you right at the beginning, Thomas, and it was from Roger, and he asked about, in terms of biotechnology, how do you avoid unintended consequences? And I hope that you understand that a little bit more than I do, because it seems quite a bit cloak and dagger, but do you understand what he means, and can you give a...
Yeah, my understanding here, and Roger can correct me if wrong, is unintended consequences are when you set something up with a plan and then it goes in a different angle. So, for example, with Australian biodiversity, where they imported in, well, for example, they brought in rabbits as pets unintentionally, and then they kind of bred and kept escaping, and then they had a big plague of rabbits, which they then had to biologically control. Australia's had a few cases of biological control going wrong. And in this case, with black soldier fly and applying biotechnologies, I mean, this is a very broad question, and applying biotechnologies in general to any species, you need to really keep in mind what you're doing, and you monitor it before it comes out to the market. So there's a whole process to be working through in terms of regulatory as well. And applying it from a black soldier fly perspective, for example, what you'd do is you'd have stringent bar control and bar safety to make sure this thing is not getting out into the wild, and then making sure that the traits you're developing do not have impact on wild populations. This is the same with salmon breeding, etc., and other animals, basically making sure that the populations we develop don't impact our biodiversity. I think it's a fairly broad question, so that's my perspective on that in terms of how we'd address that, Roger, and you'd work with industry to make sure that as an industry as a whole, we can operate properly on making sure there are no consequences of what we develop.
Again, I think that would, falls great into the call for collaboration to ensure that, we are collaborative on safeguarding. It's super important for everyone, because if a scandal comes out from one company, it puts everyone in hot water. So yeah, it's another great call for collaboration on that front as well.
What I would agree is definitely in terms of how we, given that the industry is still developing, it's how we position what techniques and approaches we bring to bear as an industry, to be mindful of that, because yes, otherwise we can get dropped like a hot potato, and we wouldn't want that happening to the industry.
No. And I wonder, it's kind of come up where a lot of people, they've moved to vegetarianism or veganism because they feel that the way that meat is farmed is cruel to animals, your battery hens and that kind of thing. Do we feel that there's a little bit of a less sympathy towards insects than there is to maybe chickens, cows and pigs? Anyone can jump in on this one. It's more of just a general thought.
I'm happy to contribute. At high level, again, it's a case of making sure that welfare is in place. As an industry, there are already voluntary codes in terms of how we rear insects. This has been drafted up by IPEF in terms of making sure that the insects are in a situation where they are not effectively stressed in the same way that you do it for other animals. So these frameworks are developing, and there's also context around how do we produce insects in different environments. For example, there's organic farming and all these kinds of things. These are coming through the system and the pipeline. So this we'll see these things evolve over time.
I think that the thought is that most of the insect nutrition is in itself a lot less genetically modified. People think that it's a lot more that it's greener and there's a lot less chemicals used or any sort of modification, and that's sort of just the general consensus on it. If we don't have any other questions in the Q&A, I wanted to ask everyone. Oh, I think that we have someone that's put their hand up. Peter, you put your hand up. If you can just put your question in the Q&A. I wanted to just ask everyone collectively, what made you get into this? It's not something that a lot of people, you know, when they're a child, are like, when I grow up, I want to be an insect farmer. It's not something that people really think about. So if you want to just go and let us know what made what made you get into this? Do you want to go first, Thomas?
Yeah, if I can take a second to approach Roger's comment there. In terms of super breeding or having things escape into the wild, yes. If we are going down the bioengineered route though, Roger, you can also build in things to make that less likely to happen. And that is one way you would do this. This is a bit like synthetic biology principles, where you make sure that the things you engineer, and this is even done with simpler organisms which can have a tendency potentially to get out, that you basically make them not function in the wild or not capable of breeding in the wild. So that's just to address Roger's point. And in terms of what got me into the industry, in my case, it was really seeing an opportunity there in terms of what insect farming needs to go to the next level, which was genetics. If I want to give you the more basic way I got in, it was I was in Belgium and I came across someone cooking insects and I tasted them and they tasted great. And that was filed at the back of my head for a few years. And I came across a magazine which then said, why not eat insects? And I got it all going again. The only thing is, when you look at the price again, it's the price of insects for food, for example, is quite steep still. So it needs to come down. And you were mentioning langoustines and seafood. It needs to be in that price range for people to even, you know, start buying it a bit more on the regular. And again, we'll see it come as our industry develops.
Okay, great. What about you, Bob? What got you into it?
One email.
Dale?
Yeah, that's the reality. We have you already in agricultural engineering and so on, and yeah, we got an email from, in this case, Synergy in Kenya, and simply asked some questions, and we had no connection with the insect industry, but okay, we started thinking along and looking for solutions, and from there, of course, we started looking more. Okay, what is their background? Why did they do this? Why do they do this? What's the industry? And from there, okay, we also saw the potential, and we again first focused on Synergy, but there in the end we realized a successful project. Okay, and there I said, okay, now I can also prove what has been theory in advance. Okay, now we want to again bring it in the industry and again create a chain reaction instead of everybody being closed. Okay, no, tell your story, let people see what you're doing, and from there develop. But again, in short, one email.
Wow, just the power of just one email. And what about you, Christian?
For me, it was fascination and the challenge of introducing a new product into a market. Like I said, I'm really fascinated by that process. And also the idea that, you know, the world is not becoming a better place unless we fix it. And it's more the challenge and the fact that it's a good product. It's actually something that can be incorporated into everyday food. And I mean, I still love my steak. I love a steak from time to time, but I know that we cannot continue eating steak, all of us, at one time. So this is an elegant solution to a problem that we all face.
No, I think that I can agree there. And I think that everyone has sort of just said, has mentioned it seemed like a good challenge. I think everyone on the panel saw this and was just like, that looks like something really hard to do, but I want to do it. And once I do, it will make such a huge difference because we've taken on that challenge. So I appreciate everyone's pure tenacity in answering that, to be honest. And Leo, do you want to finish off with how you got into
Yes.
the
Yeah, actually, for me also, like I was searching for something what I can change something in the world, and something in which I also see a great opportunity. So I started actually building a aquaponic system, which is actually a combination of fish farming and plant farming. Yeah, and we wanted to do this, or we did this in a commercial scale, and like the main cost factor actually is the fish feed. So yeah, there we thought about, yeah, how can we change this? And then we had a closer look into fish feed in general, like if we can produce it ourselves, or I don't know, stuff like that. If we can use different other ingredients which are maybe cheaper, and there we saw, yeah, well, actually the protein, and there actually the high value protein like fish meal and soy, those are the important the expensive ones, and also the unsustainable ones. So there the first idea came up to just build an insect farm and change this whole problem. So yeah, this is how I came to this topic.
That's another point, a good point, that the applications of insects are infinite. I mean, there's so many applications, cosmetics, I mean, from everything. There are known applications that are out there, and all we need is time to develop these, and marketing and science, and we can do this, something new.
No, you're right. Insects have been used in cosmetics since ancient Egyptian times, and they're still being used now in eyeshadows and things. But I'm going to finish off the session there. I don't want to keep anyone longer than they need to be. First of all, I want to say such a huge thank you to our entire panel, Thomas, Christian, Bob and Leo. It's been a real journey and of inspiration and insight from all of you. Everyone had something really different and interesting to say. The whole thing has been recorded. We're going to do a write-up on the RegTech Talks website, and we're going to have the recording hosted there as well. It'll go out across our social channels. Thank you to everyone who came to the event and for the questions as well. Really appreciate that. And let's see if we can all do a little bit more to fly the flag in the future for insect nutrition and the future of feeding the planet in a more sustainable way.